I froze halfway down the aisle, my boarding pass still in my hand. The man in the dark suit standing by seat 14C had just leaned in, close enough that his shoulder brushed mine, and said four words no one else could hear. Get off this train. Not a plane this time, I want to make sure you know that up front, because where I'm from, we don't fly much. We take the coast Starlight down from Seattle to see family, and that's exactly what I was doing that morning. My name is Walter Greer. I'm 67 years old, a retired structural engineer, and for 38 years I signed off on the bones of buildings, the parts nobody sees, the parts that either hold or don't. You learn something doing that kind of work for 4 decades. You learn that failure never happens all at once. It happens quietly, in places nobody's looking, until the day the weight finally lands wrong. I want to tell you about the day I felt that same quiet failure happening in my own family, and about the stranger who noticed it before I did. My son Craig and his wife Denise had been staying with me for almost a year by then. Craig lost his position at the logistics company back in the spring. Restructuring, he called it, though I never asked too many questions, because that's not how we did things in my house growing up, and it's not how I raised him either. Denise had been between jobs longer than that, something in insurance claims, though she was cagey about the details even before any of this started. They moved into my basement in June with 2 suitcases and a U-Haul full of furniture that never quite fit anywhere, and life became a routine of nods in the hallway and long silences over coffee. That Tuesday afternoon, I was in my workshop out back, going through old blueprints I kept from my working days, sentimental junk, my late wife used to call it, and she wasn't wrong when I heard the back door, and then both sets of footsteps on the stairs, moving with a kind of purpose that made the hair on my arms stand up before I understood why. Denise came in first. Craig trailed behind her, hands jammed in his pockets, eyes on everything except me. Walter. Denise's voice had a sweetness to it that didn't match her face. We need to talk to you about something. I set down the blueprint I was holding, slow, the way I used to when a junior engineer brought me a calculation I didn't trust. Buys you time to think. About what? I said. Craig cleared his throat. We were thinking about family, Dad. About doing something together before things get busier for everyone. He wouldn't look at me. Remember the trip to Glacier Park? When I was maybe 12? You got altitude sick on that trip, I said. Threw up twice on the Ranger Trail and made us turn back. I was a kid, he said. Too fast. I'd handle it fine now. Denise cut in smooth as a blade. We want to do the train down to San Diego. The coast Starlight, the whole route, sleeper car, the works. Our treat, completely paid for. I looked at my son and I saw something I recognized from 38 years of watching junior staff try to hide a bad number in a good-looking spreadsheet. Desperation wearing a nice suit. When? I asked. Next week, Denise said. It's all arranged. We just need you to say yes. That night Denise cooked dinner, which was strange all by itself, because Denise did not cook. She moved through my kitchen with a comfort that made my skin crawl a little, if I'm honest with you, the way a stranger moving your furniture around makes a room feel less like home. Craig poured wine with a hand that wasn't steady. So this was all planned without asking me first, I said, taking the glass. We wanted it to be a surprise, Craig said. A good one. And then, between one bite and the next, Denise set her fork down and said, Walter, your policy through the union, that's still $580,000, isn't it? That's a substantial amount to have sitting there. My fork stopped in the air. How do you know that number? Craig mentioned it once, she said lightly, cutting her chicken into pieces so even they looked measured with a ruler. Just conversation. I looked at my son. He was very interested in his plate. There's a thing that happens in my old line of work. You run a stress test on a beam, and you're not trying to break it. You're trying to find out where it's already weak. So I ran one. I haven't been sleeping right, I said. Chest feels tight some nights. Probably nothing. I watched my son's face for exactly one unguarded second. His eyes lit up. Actually lit up. Then he caught it and reshaped his face into concern. You should get that looked at, Dad. Denise smiled at me, warm as a furnace. Craig worries too much. You're the picture of health, Walter. Their eyes met across the table for half a second. Half a second is nothing, unless you've spent 4 decades in rooms full of people trying not to tell you the truth. I know what a look like that means. After they went down to the basement, I found the reservation printout sitting on the counter, already paid. My berth already booked, They'd been certain of my yes before they'd even asked the question. I sat up that night with an old photograph of Craig at 6 years old, gap-toothed, holding a fishing rod nearly as tall as he was, grinning like the world was a gift somebody wrapped just for him. I let myself feel the whole weight of it. Then, I put the photograph away, because 38 years of engineering had taught me one rule that never once failed me. Every structure that fails leaves a record of exactly how and why. You just have to be willing to look. By morning, I'd made my decision. I would go. I would watch. I would document. When Craig knocked on my door at 7 with a smile, a little too bright for that hour, and asked, "So, Dad, San Diego?" I told him yes. I watched relief cross his face, followed by something else. Not warmth, anticipation. I packed with the same method I used to bring to a job site, nothing left to chance. My medications went into my carry-on bag instead of my checked suitcase. A small precaution. The kind that looks paranoid right up until it isn't. The drive to the station told its own story if you were keeping notes, which I was. Craig said the trunk was full, so my duffel rode in my lap, but I'd seen inside that trunk an hour earlier, and it was nearly empty. Denise typed messages on her phone and deleted the threads the second she hit send, her face doing that flat, calculating thing I'd started to think of as her working expression. At the station, they boarded ahead of me into the sleeper car reserved under their names, and I was walked to a coach seat 3 cars back, alone, my duffel bag handle biting into my palm. If you've ever stood somewhere and realized the people who are supposed to be yours have already stopped looking back for you, you know it isn't loneliness. It's information. I found my seat and settled in, and that's when the man in the dark suit came down the aisle. Not a conductor, I noticed that right away. No uniform, just a badge on a lanyard that said Amtrak Police in small letters. He paused by my row, pretending to check something on his tablet, and he said it quiet enough that no one 3 feet away would have caught it. "Get off this train. Next stop. Don't make it look sudden." Then he was gone up the aisle, checking other tickets like nothing had happened. I sat there with my heart doing something it hadn't done in 20 years. Was this some kind of mistake? A different Walter Greer? I took my phone out like I was going to call someone, just to have something to do with my hands, and that's when he came back, and this time whatever professional calm he'd been wearing had cracked straight through. His hand closed on my forearm. I could feel it trembling. "Sir," he said, "I am asking you, please, get off at the next station." I looked at him, and I want to tell you exactly what I saw in his eyes, because it's the thing that decided everything that came after. Not confusion, not a mistake, fear. The specific kind of fear that belongs to a man who knows something and doesn't know what to do with it yet. "You're certain," I said. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. 3 rows up, I heard Craig's voice, too casual. "Dad? Everything okay back there?" I made my decision the way you make a call on a job site when a beam is groaning and you don't have time for a committee meeting. I stood up, gripped the seat back, and said, loud enough for the car to hear, "I don't feel right." My chest and I let my knees buckle into the aisle. The fear in my voice was real. Only the reason for it was invented. The car came alive around me, a nurse 2 rows back, kneeling beside me, someone calling for the conductor, someone else saying they'd radio ahead for paramedics at the next stop. And through all of it, I kept my eyes open just enough to look up the aisle at my son and his wife. Before they could arrange their faces for the audience, I saw it. Not fear for me, disappointment. Plain and unmistakable, the look of 2 people watching an experiment fail to produce the result they were counting on. Craig half rose out of his seat, aggressive for a half-second before he caught himself and softened it into something that looked like worry. "Dad, should we come back there?" A conductor blocked the aisle. "Sir, please stay seated. We have this handled." As they wheeled me off onto the platform at the next station, I heard Denise's voice, low, meant only for Craig, but carrying in that hush that comes right after a crisis. "This ruins everything." And my son hissed back, "Not here." I want to stop the story right there for one breath, because some of you listening have lived through a version of this exact moment. If you've ever caught, in the face of someone you raised, one flash of the wrong feeling, relief where grief should be, irritation where fear should be, and then watched it disappear so fast you told yourself you imagined it. Neighbor, I promise you, you didn't imagine it. The flash is the truth. Everything that comes after the flash is the performance. They set me up in the station's first aid office, where a paramedic checked my vitals, found nothing wrong, and figured it for anxiety. Through the window, I watched my train pull out, carrying my son and his wife toward a vacation whose entire purpose had just walked off onto a platform in Klamath Falls, Oregon. My phone buzzed. Craig. Dad, hope you're feeling better. Call when you can. Then again. Then a third time. I turned it off. The door opened, and the transit officer came in, off duty now, out of his jacket, face gray. He checked the hallway twice before shutting the door behind him. What I'm about to show you could cost me my job, he said, but I couldn't sit on it. He pulled out his phone with unsteady hands. I recorded this in the men's room at the station before boarding. It's your daughter-in-law. The screen showed a bathroom stall, tile, and fluorescent light, but the audio came through with a terrible clarity. Denise's voice, calm and organized as a woman reading a grocery list. The capsules dissolve completely, no taste, no smell. Cardiac events on a moving train read as natural causes 9 times out of 10. By the time anyone competent looks at it, we're 3 states away. A pause. Someone answering on the other end. 580. Craig's nervous, but he's committed. And then my daughter-in-law laughed. She laughed, neighbor, like she'd just told a decent joke at a dinner party. I watched that recording 3 times, and each time I found another layer underneath it. The dosage, the timeline, the profit margin somebody had worked out on my own heartbeat. Who was she talking to? I asked, and my voice came out steadier than it had any right to. I don't know, the officer said, but she said the plan was moving forward, and that your son was her words fully on board. I looked at this stranger who had just wrecked his own career to save a man he'd never met, and I asked him the only question that mattered. Why? Something old moved across his face. My father, he said. 4 years ago, my stepmother talked him into changing his will 2 months before he died in his sleep. The coroner called it natural causes. I knew. I couldn't prove a thing, and I said nothing. His jaw went tight. I've been silent once in my life. I'm not doing it again. I wrote his name and number into the notebook I've carried in my jacket pocket since 1987, an old habit from job sites, where you learn fast that if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. We shook hands, and by the end of it, his had finally stopped shaking too. Stop them, he said. That was the whole goodbye. The bus ride home took most of the day, and somewhere around hour 4 I stopped grieving and started working, because grief doesn't build anything, and I had 38 years of habits that do. When I finally got back to my own house, it looked the same from the curb, same porch, same garden I'd kept since 1994, but unlocking my own front door, it felt contaminated, like every room now had a second history running underneath the one I thought I knew. I went straight to my study, pulled every file I owned, and laid my whole life out across the dining table in order. Insurance, banking, the deed, my will. A chain of custody, same as I'd have built for a failed structure, except this time the structure was me. Hours passed, and then I found it. A change of beneficiary form on my life insurance policy, dated 8 months back, moving the payout off my niece Caroline, a hospice nurse in Boise who never asked me for a dime in her life, and on to Craig Greer. The signature at the bottom was a decent copy of mine, except for the capital G. Too many loops. A flourish I have never once made in 67 years of signing my own name. I photographed it and kept digging, and the floor kept dropping out from under me. Bank statements showing $38,000 transferred out over 5 months, in amounts small enough that I'd never noticed. A power of attorney granting Craig authority over my finances, signed in that same forged hand. And under all of it, the worst folder medical records, from a doctor I had never once visited, documenting a cognitive decline I did not have. Confusion, memory lapses, progressive impairment, all invented, all typed up clean and official, all run through systems that Denise, with her years in insurance claims processing, clearly knew how to work. They hadn't just planned to kill me. They'd spent months erasing me, first building a paper version of Walter Greer, whose mind was already gone, so that when the real one died, it would read as sad but expected, and any objection I raised beforehand would mean nothing. I stood alone in my dining room at midnight and said it out loud, because saying it made it real the way writing it down makes a test result real. They'd planned this while living under my roof, eating at my table, and I felt the shock burn off and leave behind something colder and a lot more useful. 3 days later, I sat across from Miriam Castellano, 22 years in elder law, gray at the temples, a handshake like a signature on a contract. I watched her professional composure crack folder by folder, forged beneficiary, fraudulent power of attorney, fabricated medical decline. When she got to the doctor's records, she looked up. Your daughter-in-law works in insurance claims. 15 years, I said. She knows exactly which forms make a lie look official. Miriam exhaled slow. She engineered your incompetence. Then, I have to ask you something, and I want you to really think before you answer. When this is over, do you want justice, or do you want revenge? I didn't hesitate, because I'd already worked through that question alone in the dark. I want them to understand exactly what they did, I said. And I want consequences that outlive any apology they ever try to give me. She nodded slowly. Then we build it airtight, and we let them keep digging their own hole. 1 week, she said. Protective orders, account freezes, all with delayed notice. Act normal, Walter. They're going to panic when the locks engage. Good, I told her. Panicked people make mistakes. I built my whole career watching that happen on job sites. That night, Craig texted, Dad, dinner soon? We should talk about your future. I texted back 6 words. Yes, we should discuss the future. He read it as surrender. I meant it as a warning he wouldn't understand until it was too late to matter. What followed was the strangest performance of my entire life, and I gave it everything I had left. For 2 weeks I played the confused old man their forged file described. I let my coffee go cold, staring at nothing. I asked Denise which pills were mine while a camera hidden above my refrigerator recorded her satisfied little smile as she sorted them into my palm. Of course, Walter. That's what family's for. I had a security company install 12 cameras with full audio at my own request, and here's the part that still makes me smile. Craig and Denise approved every single one of them enthusiastically. Smart thinking, Dad. For your safety. They never once asked to see the specifications. Never realized every whispered conversation in my own living room was streaming straight to a cloud account only I could open. I added one more piece myself, a small recorder tucked into the heating vent above the dining room. The same trick a colleague once used to catch subcontractors skimming material orders on a job we ran together in the 90s. Old tricks, new stakes. It paid off inside of 48 hours. Late one night, through my headphones, I heard Denise's voice, tight with fury. The train was supposed to end this. Now we're at 0. And Craig, you said the capsules were undetectable. And Denise, dropping into that flat, clinical register that scared me worse than shouting ever could. Then we go to plan B. The incompetency route. Look at him, he's already halfway gone. I lay in bed 1 floor above them recording, and I thought, not with rage, with something quieter. You're not watching me decline, you're watching me aim. The most dangerous work happened deeper in the night, cloning files off Craig's laptop while he slept, an external drive slowly filling up with evidence. One close call, at 90% copied, when I heard footsteps in the hall and slipped out through the connecting bathroom, with the drive in my bathrobe pocket, and my heart going harder than it had in the aisle of that train. In daylight, I built the legal fortress a new will, ironclad, signed in front of a notary named Rosa Alvarez, who read every clause aloud, filmed my declaration, and took my fingerprints. Your son gets nothing, she said, not a question. My son negotiated a price for my death, I told her. He'll receive exactly what he paid for. Everything goes to the Greer family trades scholarship trade school tuition for kids who can't afford it, kids like I was. Miriam handed me a burner phone in a parking garage. 1 button. If this gets physical, police are already briefed. I hoped I'd never need it, and had a feeling I might. The freeze hit on a Wednesday morning. I sat behind my newspaper counting to 60, letting the reaction build upstairs while Craig's laptop started chiming error after error. Access denied, account locked, appear in person to resolve. I filmed it from the hallway, unnoticed, as his call to the bank went from confident to begging, and when he hung up, his face had gone the color of drywall. All third-party access is frozen, he told Denise, pending a fraud investigation. That evening I made pot roast, slow and low, the way I learned after my wife passed, and served it to my would-be killers with steady hands. Somewhere between the potatoes and the silence, I said, easy as weather talk. Funny thing, the bank called about some unusual transfers on my account. I asked them to dig into it properly. Craig choked on his water. Denise's fork stopped in midair for one tremor before she mastered it. then came back at me with the only tool she had left. Walter, this is exactly why you need someone managing things for you. You're clearly getting confused. Confused, I repeated, turning the word over like I was inspecting a weld. Interesting choice of words. Medical oversight? For my own protection? I looked at her steady. Protection from what, exactly? From whom? Nobody answered that one out loud, but their faces did. That night, the living room camera caught their war council in perfect audio. Denise pacing, "We need medical power of attorney. I know people who owe me favors. We get him, declared unfit. We become his guardians, and guardians control whether this investigation even keeps going. And my son, my boy who once cried over a lost fishing lure like the world had ended, nodded along, doing the math. I opened my old job site notebook and wrote one line. Sometimes the only way to teach the final lesson is to let them fail the test they wrote themselves. Then I slept like a man with nothing left to lose, because I didn't. The fake doctor called 2 mornings later, a pleasant voice claiming to be my family physician, which was interesting, since I've never had one by that name in my life, inviting me in for a routine cognitive evaluation. Of course, I said warmly. I appreciate the thorough care. Then I called Miriam, who checked the license and called back in under 2 minutes. No such doctor registered in the state of Washington. I kept the appointment anyway, recorder in my shirt pocket, police on standby 3 blocks away, and found exactly what I expected. A rented office suite, a paper sign taped up that morning, and a stranger with a fake credential asking me questions engineered so any answer sounded like decline. I performed just enough confusion to keep him talking, got every word on tape, and drove straight to the real thing the next morning. Dr. Elaine Whitfield, 28 years in forensic psychiatry, ran me through memory batteries and pattern tests for 2 hours, watching my method as much as my answers, and set down her pen at the end and told me, "Mr. Greer, your cognitive function is sharper than most people 20 years younger than you. No decline, no delusion, no paranoia." I drove home with her report on the passenger seat and found Craig's car blocking my driveway. He stood on my porch holding a manila envelope, wearing the look of a man who's decided his only move left is to bluff. "Dad, this is for your own good. You're not well." I read every page, standing right there in my own driveway while he stared at the hedge. Petition for guardianship, paranoid delusions about family, progressive memory loss. A sworn statement from Dr. Monica Reyes, a physician who does not exist anywhere I can find her. I looked up at my son and asked him one question. "Whose safety is this really for, Craig? Yours or mine?" He left without answering. That evening, I went door to door around my own neighborhood with my old notebook, gentle as I know how to be, and the sworn statements fell apart one at a time. "My neighbor, Mrs. Okafor cried on her own porch. Craig told me it was paperwork to help take care of you. I only ever saw you in your garden at night checking your new cameras." She agreed to recant on the spot. 2 more neighbors did the same. 3 others wouldn't answer their doors at all, and I learned later that my son had paid them $400 here, $200 there. Testimony bought at whatever the going rate is for a man's desperation. At the preliminary hearing, the judge read both filings with open skepticism and ordered an independent evaluation from Dr. Whitfield. Miriam wanted to file everything right then, every charge, all of it, end it. I told her not yet. If we move now, they lawyer up and stop talking. People confess the most when they still think they're winning. She warned me it was a risk. I told her I'd spent 38 years watching corner-cutting contractors double down every single time, right up until the building came down around them. Dr. Whitfield's report landed like a verdict before the actual verdict: full capacity, no impairment, petition recommended for denial. That same afternoon in Miriam's conference room, we built the whole case, a 60-page counter-filing covering 17 separate criminal acts, 2 boxes of exhibits, color-coded and dated. "We file everything," Miriam said. "Everything," I agreed. That afternoon, a process server rang my own front door while I watched from across the street with a zoom lens. Denise answered. He handed her the envelope, and I watched her face run through its last honest sequence: shock, recognition, fear, before she screamed for Craig, and their fight played out in silhouette against my own living room curtains. The server's report, later entered as evidence, preserved her exact words. "You told me he was too old to ever put this together." That night, my cameras caught the frenzy Craig mass deleting files, attempting a drive wipe with the clumsy panic of a man who learned computers from an engineer father who understood exactly how hard drives actually work, and Denise feeding papers into a shredder until it jammed, then tearing them apart by hand. Miriam called me, watching the same feed remotely. Every deletion is a new charge, she said. Obstruction. They're building their own case against themselves now. A settlement offer came within 2 days. Return the $38,000. Vacate the house immediately. Waive all inheritance. Accept a restraining order in exchange for dropping every criminal charge. I read it at the same dining table where all of this had started. They researched what stops a heart, I told Miriam. They priced it. They bought the tickets. This is not a contract dispute. Schedule the trial. A second offer arrived weeks later, $120,000, hand-delivered by Denise's mortified sister, the word mistakes in the very first line. I uncapped my pen and wrote across the top of it, in the same handwriting I used to sign off on 30 years of blueprints. Justice is not for sale. See you in court. I called the transit officer that evening and asked if he was ready to testify in open court. He didn't take a single breath to answer. My father never got his day, he said. Yours is going to count for both of them. Their world came apart slow and total after that. Craig's gambling debts surfaced through discovery over $70,000 across sports books and a crypto account nobody knew about and the collectors. Once word got out, he'd inherit nothing. Went from phone calls to showing up at his temp job. Denise's employer opened its own internal investigation, found her fingerprints on falsified records going back years, and ended her career in a 15-minute meeting with a security escort, walking her out past her own coworkers. Their new apartment had thin walls, and the neighbors heard everything through them. This is your fault, your debts, your weakness. And then, one night, the sentence that summed up their whole marriage. Now we've got nothing but each other. And her laugh back, bitter and hollow. That's the worst part. The night before the trial, I stood in my study in front of the wall, where I'd pinned every document, every date, every thread connecting them, and I took down the one thing on that wall that was never evidence at all, Craig at 6 years old, holding that fishing rod, grinning like the whole world was his. I let myself grieve for exactly as long as that photograph deserved. Then I wrote 3 lines on the back and sealed it in an envelope addressed to my son, to be delivered after the verdict, whichever way it went. I gave you everything I had. You chose this instead. Now we both live with what's left. The trial ran 4 days. The courtroom filled early, the story had leaked, and a train full of poison makes the local news every time. The prosecutor's opening was surgical. The defendants planned the murder of Walter Greer for insurance proceeds, researched the substance, forged the paperwork, boarded the train, and the only reason the victim sat in this courtroom instead of appearing in a coroner's file was one transit officer with a conscience and a phone. Then the recording played through the courtroom speakers, and I watched 12 jurors listen to my daughter-in-law price my heartbeat at $580,000 and laugh about it. Craig flinched at the laugh. Denise stared at a fixed point on the far wall and did not move for the full 90 seconds. The officer took the stand, and his voice shook for exactly the first 4 questions before it steadied and stayed there. I heard her plan a man's death like she was scheduling a delivery, he said. 4 years ago I stayed quiet, and I buried my father wondering if I could have stopped it. I wasn't doing that twice. The document examiner walked the jury through the forged capital G under 400 power magnification. The bank walked them through $38,000 stolen in careful, quiet pieces. Doctor. Whitfield dismantled the fake incompetency file in under 15 minutes on the stand. The recovered emails scrolled across the courtroom screen dosage, timing, altitude, a price while my son studied his own hands like they belonged to somebody else. Then I took the stand. When did you first suspect something was wrong? The prosecutor asked me. When the invitation came, I said. 8 months of near silence in my own house, then a fully paid vacation with a deadline attached. In my old line of work, we called that an anomalous reading. And anomalous readings get investigated. Every time. No exceptions. And what did you do about it? Exactly what I did for 38 years on every job site I ever ran, I said. I documented everything. I trusted the record over the story I wanted to believe. I verified before I concluded anything. I just never once imagined the structure I'd be inspecting would be my own family. The defense's cross-examination lasted 6 minutes and somehow made me sound more credible, not less. The jury came back in under 3 hours. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty of fraud. Guilty of forgery. Guilty. 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 Straight down the list, each word landing on my son like weight on a beam that's already cracked, until his head was down in his hands, and one tear finally broke through Denise's composure and got wiped away with one knuckle before anyone else could see it. At sentencing, the judge asked if I wanted to speak. I stood, and I looked at both of them, and I kept it short, because 38 years of signing my name to other people's work taught me that brevity is what people actually remember. You lived under my roof. You ate at my table. You answered 38 years of trust with a dosage calculation and a price tag. I don't hate either one of you. I grieve you. You traded your whole lives for money you were never going to touch, and that math is its own life sentence. The court doesn't need to add much to it. Craig received 11 years, no possibility of parole before 9, full restitution, and a permanent felony record. Denise received 14. The court found her role as the architect of the plan, and her professional exploitation of patient and financial record systems called for the harsher term. Her license was revoked permanently, every inheritance right stripped, a restraining order that follows her for the rest of her natural life. The judge's closing line went into the transcript and into me for good. This was not a moment of weakness. This was a project, built over months, by two people who mistook this man's trust for an opening. The only mercy in this courtroom is that he lived to see it end. Outside on the courthouse steps, I gave the reporters about 15 seconds on trust and consequences and declined the rest. In the parking structure afterward, I saw my son one last time, being led out a side door in restraints, head down. Our eyes met for maybe 2 seconds. He looked away first, and what I felt in that moment wasn't victory. It wasn't even really relief. It was the specific, quiet feeling of a ledger that finally, after 2 years, balances out to zero. Here's what this whole thing taught me, neighbor, and I want to say it to you plainly, because it's the only reason I'm telling you any of this tonight. The mistake almost all of us make is believing that being loved and being truly seen are the same thing. They are not. Denise counted on exactly that confusion. She knew a father will explain away almost anything to protect the picture he's built of his own child. That kind of denial is the most reliable accomplice there is, and it doesn't cost the guilty party one single dime. What saved my life wasn't luck. It was one stranger who refused to stay quiet when it would have been so much easier to look the other way. And it was 38 years of one simple habit that any of you listening can start tonight if you want to. So start it. This week, pull your policy paperwork. Call whoever holds your life insurance and have them read your current beneficiaries back to you out loud. Then ask them to flag the account so any change ever requires your direct verbal confirmation. 10 minutes of your time. Most folks haven't checked in a decade, and the people who'd benefit from a change are counting on exactly that. Then sit with the harder question, the one I still turn over some nights in my workshop. Of the people closest to you, who knows more about what your death is worth on paper than they know about how your actual day went. Take your time with that one. I did. Now, friend, it's your turn. I've argued with myself over my own choices for 2 years running, and I still don't have it fully settled. Put a 1 in the comments if you think I was right to go home and build the case quietly, letting them keep incriminating themselves for weeks. Put a 2 if you think I should have taken that officer's recording straight to the police that same afternoon before they took one more breath as free people. Put a 3 if you think I owed my son a face-to-face conversation, father to son, before I ever let the law get involved. Because some nights, I'll be honest with you, I still wonder. Tell me where you're listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. It still gets to me every time, hearing how far these stories travel. And if a stranger ever stepped in to protect you when your own people wouldn't, or if you've ever caught that one wrong flash cross a familiar face, I want to hear about it below. Somebody watching tonight is sitting at their own dinner table right now, looking at numbers that don't add up, wondering if they're losing their mind. Neighbor, you're not losing your mind. You're paying attention. If this one meant something to you, stay a while and subscribe. I've got a lifetime of these, and this little corner of the internet only exists because folks like you keep coming back to it. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. I'll see you in the next one.